Welcome back to Conversations That Awaken by Joe Bandra. If you've been with us since episode 1, thank you for taking this journey with us. Over the first 10 episodes, we've questioned many of the assumptions most of us inherited without ever examining them. We've explored the nature of reality, the illusion of separation, the origins of belief, the question of God, the self-organizing universe, the fact of being, the limits of language, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. You may have noticed that we've returned to some of the same ideas more than once. That wasn't by accident. Some truths cannot be understood by hearing them only once. They must be approached from different angles, examined through different lenses, and reflected upon until they become your own direct insight. Repetition is not about convincing you, it is about inviting you to observe more deeply. Our purpose has never been to give you another belief system. It has always been to encourage you to examine, question, investigate, and ultimately understand for yourself. Because borrowed knowledge is information. Direct experience, on the other hand, is transformation. If you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to begin with episode 1. Each conversation builds upon the previous one, forming a journey from questioning the world to questioning the one who believes they are separate from it. So wherever you are in the world, thank you for listening. Take a moment to become fully present. Set aside, just for a little while, everything you think you know. And together, let's question everything. I am Kim. I hope you had the opportunity to read or listen to Finding Neve by Joe Bandra. The name Neve, heaven spelled backward, symbolizes a journey of self-discovery, an inward return to the source of true happiness. It is an invitation to look beyond the stories we tell ourselves, rediscover our authentic nature, and awaken to the peace and wholeness that have always been within us.
So if you were to take a quantum physicist, a theoretical mathematician, a behavioral psychologist, an epistemological philosopher, and, a mystic, right?
Right.
And you lock them all in a room and ask them just one single question, what is reality? You would probably expect a massive fistfight.
Oh, absolutely. A total brawl.
Yeah, because you would expect 5 completely different, violently opposed languages all trying to define the universe, But according to the source material we are plunging into today for this deep dive, if you actually let them argue long enough.
And if you let them dig deep enough into their own respective fields, yeah.
Exactly. They don't fight. They actually end up drawing the exact same picture. So today, we are tackling the simplest, yet honestly the most dangerous question in human history.
It really is the ultimate late-night staring at the ceiling inquiry, isn't it?
Totally.
It's the one that keeps humanity perpetually awake.
Right. It's that moment, maybe it's 2 a.m, the house is completely quiet, and you're just up to get a glass of water. You walk past the bathroom mirror, you catch your own reflection, and for just a split second, the script of your life just kind of pauses.
Everything drops away.
Exactly. The familiarity totally drops away, and you look at those eyes in the mirror and think, what exactly is looking back at me? Like, what is this?
Which is terrifying and beautiful all at once.
It is. And that isn't just some dry academic riddle. That is the foundational conversation of our entire species. And our mission today is to guide you, the listener, through an investigation of that very question.
And we're using an extraordinary new framework that might genuinely change how you interact with that mirror.
We really are. We are anchoring this entire deep dive on some incredibly profound source material. We are going to be exploring extended excerpts and concepts from the upcoming book, The Nature of Reality by Joe Bandra.
It's such a fascinating text.
It is. But before we go any further, I feel like I need to set the table and establish a clear constraint for you, the listener. Because, let's be honest, when you hear a book title like The Nature of Reality, it is incredibly easy to brace yourself for, like a listicle.
Oh, yeah, like a self-help thing.
Right. You might expect us to walk you through 10 easy steps to ultimate cosmic enlightenment, or maybe hand you a rigid new philosophical rulebook to make your daily life perfectly frictionless.
Which is exactly the opposite of what Bandra's work does, actually.
Exactly the opposite.
And it's the opposite of what we're going to do in this deep dive. Instead of offering 10 easy steps, we're going to examine what happens when our endless, exhausting, centuries-long search for ultimate answers suddenly collapses.
And it doesn't collapse into despair, which is the crazy part.
No, not at all. It collapses into something entirely different. The goal here isn't to hand you a new metaphysical doctrine to believe in. Bandra is incredibly militant about that point.
Right, he doesn't want followers.
Exactly. The purpose is to invite you to look relentlessly at your own direct, unedited experience.
I love how you framed that. It's not about adding another heavy belief system to your mental backpack.
Right.
It's about unpacking the backpack completely and looking at the fabric of the bag itself.
That's a great way to put it.
Thanks. But to really understand why Joe Bandra felt compelled to write this upcoming book in the first place, we can't just jump straight into his conclusions, can we?
No, you really have to understand the historical momentum behind him. Because humanity has been digging into this exact mystery for millennia.
Thousands of years.
Yeah, we've just been doing it in segregated departments.
It really is the ultimate human preoccupation, isn't it?
It is. And what Bandra lays out so beautifully in those early chapters is how different, completely isolated disciplines have been circling this exact same center point over the centuries.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. So let's look at how he breaks this down. He starts with physics.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit.
Well, for the longest time, physics approached reality by looking strictly outward, right? They looked at the movement of the stars, the trajectory of planets, and then they zoomed way in.
Looking for the fundamental, indestructible building blocks of matter.
Exactly. They were searching for the absolute solid foundation of the universe.
Right. Because for hundreds of years, the goal of science was to find the literal nuts and bolts of existence. I always think back to the ancient Greeks, like Democritus, who coined the term atom.
Meaning indivisible.
Right. We spent centuries trying to find the smallest, hardest, most undeniable piece of stuff. So we could point to it and say, aha,
yeah,
there it is. That little spherical billiard ball right there. That is reality.
And everything else is just built out of that.
Exactly.
That was the dream of classical mechanics. But Bandra points out that a profound crisis occurred when physicists actually got their wish and looked deeper.
Be careful what you wish for, right?
Totally. Because when they finally cracked open the atom, that comforting solidity completely vanished.
It just evaporated.
It did. They found protons and electrons, and then they looked inside those and found quarks, and then they kept looking, and the stuff just disappeared into mathematical fields.
Meaning matter literally resolved into energy.
Yes. What we desperately wanted to be solid, absolute certainty became, at the quantum level, fundamentally a realm of probability and uncertainty.
Which is so counterintuitive to how we live our lives. I mean, it's like being handed a series of Russian nesting dolls.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, you keep opening them, expecting to find a solid, heavy little wooden block in the very center, but when you open the final doll...
It's just a cloud of smoke.
Or a math equation. So physics hits this massive wall where the physical world literally stops behaving physically. The stuff isn't made of stuff.
Right. Which leads us perfectly into the next discipline Bandra explores. Because once physicists realized the physical building blocks were essentially a mirage of probability, they had to ask a new question.
Which is, well, if matter isn't holding the universe together, what actually is?
Exactly. Which forced them to look beyond the physical entirely, straight into mathematics.
And mathematics is absolutely fascinating in this context because it approaches reality from a completely different angle, doesn't it?
It really does. It isn't looking for a physical substance to weigh or measure at all. It is looking for an invisible structural order.
An architecture.
Right. And what mathematicians discovered wasn't just a tool they invented to count apples. They discovered breathtaking patterns, intricate relationships, and this terrifyingly beautiful coherence woven into the very fabric of existence.
You know, when I was going through the notes on this section, the distinction Bandra makes between inventing math and discovering math really stopped me in my tracks.
It's a huge philosophical shift.
It is, because we usually think of math as just a human language, like English or French, just a tool we made up.
Right.
But Bandra notes that this mathematical order, things like the Fibonacci sequence appearing in the spiral of galaxies, or the arrangement of sunflower seeds.
Or fractal geometry dictating the shape of coastlines.
Yes. This order existed billions of years before a human mind ever arrived on the scene to count on its fingers.
It completely forces a massive paradigm shift. It reveals a cosmos governed not by random chaotic collisions of dead matter, but by this extraordinary underlying coherence that we can barely comprehend, let alone take credit for.
It's incredibly humbling.
It is. So physics finds the limits of the material. Math finds this invisible architecture. And then meanwhile, psychology turns the lens completely around.
Right, because psychology isn't looking outward at galaxies or abstract numbers.
No, it's aggressively investigating the instrument of observation itself. It investigates the human mind.
And when psychology puts the self under the microscope, what does it actually find? Because, I mean, intuitively, I feel like a continuous person.
We all do.
I feel like the exact same me that woke up this morning and the same me that went to kindergarten decades ago.
But psychology reveals that this deeply felt sense of identity, the very me you feel yourself to be, is largely a retroactive construction.
Which is kind of disturbing to realize.
It can be. It's an incredibly complex tapestry of episodic memories, cultural conditioning, inherited assumptions, and accumulated images. Neurologically and psychologically, the self is more of a verb than a noun.
A process.
Exactly. It is a process of continuous storytelling that we mistakenly take to be a fundamental, unchangeable entity.
The psychological you is essentially a highly edited, award-winning documentary playing on an endless loop in your own head.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
And your brain is the editor, just constantly splicing in memories, cutting out contradictions, and adding a dramatic soundtrack to convince you that you are a single, cohesive character.
Right. But when you pause the film, you realize it's just a sequence of passing frames. There's no solid core there either.
So psychology deconstructs the self, and then as Bandra traces this historical search, philosophy steps into the ring.
Yes. Philosophy is the attempt to push the very limits of human thought and language to define existence.
But Bandra points out that philosophy, despite all its rigor, eventually hits its own epistemological boundary.
It really does. It realizes the fundamental impossibility of reducing reality strictly to human concepts.
Yeah.
And more importantly, it stumbles on this incredibly strange, intractable paradox.
The knower blind spot.
Yes. The knower, the one who's doing the philosophizing, the one who is actually aware of the concepts, remains totally elusive.
It's the ultimate blind spot. You can think about a tree, you can think about a car, you can even think about your own sadness.
Right.
But the thing that is aware of the tree, the car, and the sadness cannot easily turn around and look at itself. It's like an eye trying to look at its own retina without a mirror.
Or a knife trying to cut itself. It just can't be done.
Exactly. Philosophy reaches the edge of a cliff where language simply fails. And that is exactly where Bandra brings up the final discipline.
Mysticism.
Right.
Mysticism approached this grand mystery by bypassing the intellect entirely. It wasn't about calculating trajectories, analyzing childhood trauma, or devoting logical syllogisms.
It was about direct, unmediated realization.
Yes. The core proposition of the mystic across every single tradition is that reality isn't just a puzzle to be solved intellectually. It is a state of being to be directly known and experienced prior to any conceptualization.
Okay, I want to pause and just visualize what Bandra is outlining here, because the sheer scale of this human endeavor is just monumental.
It really spans all of human history.
It does, and I've been trying to picture this multi-millennial search, and I keep coming back to an analogy.
Okay, I love your analogies. Lay it on me.
All right, imagine humanity has been trying to figure out what is at the absolute center of a massive, seemingly impenetrable mountain.
Okay, I'm out.
And we've basically spent thousands of years digging 5 completely separate tunnels from 5 different sides of this mountain.
I like the architecture of this. Walk us through it.
Well, you've got the scientists in tunnel number 1, armed with their microscopes and super colliders.
Naturally.
You've got the mathematicians in tunnel 2 with their chalkboards and algorithms. The psychologists are digging tunnel 3 with their behavioral studies and fMRI machines.
Right.
The philosophers are in tunnel 4 chipping away with formal logic. And the mystics are in tunnel 5, just sitting quietly in the dark, digging with pure, unbroken awareness.
It's a vivid picture.
And for centuries, these teams haven't really communicated. They actually kind of mock each other, you know?
Oh, they constantly mock each other.
They all expect to find something completely different at the core. A God particle, an ultimate equation, a pristine state of consciousness, a flawless, logical absolute.
But suddenly, as Bandra maps out, one by one, all of their pickaxes break through the final wall of rock.
Yes, and they all stumble, blinking and confused, into the exact same central cavern.
What's truly illuminating about Bandra's analysis is how he highlights that precise moment of convergence. All these brilliant minds, speaking completely mutually exclusive languages, using vastly different conceptual tools, ultimately hit the exact same wall of mystery.
They all found the same cavern.
Exactly. The center of the mountain isn't what any of them arrogantly predicted, yet it completely encompasses and validates all of their findings.
It's wild.
The physicist finds that matter resolves into formless probability. The mystic finds a formless direct knowing. The philosopher finds the formless limit of thought. The psychologist finds the formlessness of the ego.
They are all, in their own unique dialects, pointing to a reality that violently refuses to be boxed in by human categories of separation.
That's exactly it.
And for you listening right now, whether you're commuting or washing dishes or just pretending to work, it is incredibly valuable to pause and ask yourself, which tunnel do you usually prefer?
We definitely all have a default setting.
We do. When you are trying to make sense of your own life, when you hit a painful crisis or a moment of staggering awe, what is your default? Do you lean heavily on the psychology tunnel, immediately trying to analyze your childhood conditioning and attachment styles?
Or do you sprint to the science tunnel, looking for a neurochemical explanation for why you feel sad?
Exactly. Do you go philosophical? It is completely natural to have a preferred tunnel. We all do. But Bondra's work is asking us to stop obsessing over the shape of our specific tunnel and to finally look at the cavern that they all inevitably lead to.
And setting up this massive collective historical search is essential because it provides the necessary backdrop for a very specific, intensely personal catalyst in Joe Bondra's own life.
Right, because as you can imagine, you don't write a paradigm-shifting book like The Nature of Reality just by doing a dry literature review of human thought.
No, you definitely don't. And this is where Bondra's narrative dramatically shifts gears. We move from this grand, sweeping historical timeline of humanity right down to a very specific date and time on his calendar.
April 15th, 2020, at exactly 4:10 a.m.
That precise timestamp is the epicenter of the book. Bondra describes it as the moment that entirely dismantled and transformed everything he thought he knew about existence.
I want to really dig into what he describes happening here because he writes that at 4:18 a.m. for a distinct period, the separate self disappeared. Now, I have to admit, when I first read that phrase, my alarm bells went off.
Why is that?
Because we hear phrases like the self disappeared in modern spiritual context, and honestly, it can sound bleak, even terrifying.
It sounds like annihilation.
It does. The brain immediately pictures a dark, empty void, like you're just floating in a sensory deprivation tank of nothingness where you used to be. Is that what he is describing?
It is the most common and arguably the most damaging misconception about these kinds of shifts in consciousness. And Bandra is militant about correcting that assumption.
Thank goodness.
He clarifies with immense precision that what remained when the separate self dropped away was absolutely not emptiness. It was not a sterile nothingness. It was an absence of blackout or a psychological void.
He describes what was left as love, as peace, as an overwhelming, undeniable wholeness.
Yes.
He calls it a reality without division, without conflict, and this is the phrase that I circled 3 times in the text, a reality without a center.
That phrase, a reality without a center, is philosophically staggering.
It really messes with your head.
It does. Think about how we usually perceive the world. You feel like you are the center of the universe, looking out. Your subjective I is the focal point, and everything else, other people, the weather, the government, the stars, is on the periphery.
It's all happening around me.
Exactly. But if there is no center, by definition, there is no periphery. There is no isolated me in the middle experiencing a hostile or separate outside world.
There is just the unified, seamless happening of reality experiencing itself.
Right. The boundary line between the observer and the observed just evaporates.
But here's where I think Bondra's work elevates itself above a standard spiritual memoir.
How so?
Because the most vital thing to grasp about his 4:1 a.m. experience is the distinction he makes about its immediate aftermath. He explicitly states that this moment transformed his entire reality, not because it suddenly downloaded all the answers to his questions, but because it completely dissolved the questions themselves.
Which is a remarkably subtle but profound psychological distinction. Think about the human condition. We spend our entire lives desperately seeking answers. We are obsessed with them.
We really are. We think if I just get the right answer about my career or my relationship or the meaning of life, I will finally be at peace.
But what is an answer, really? An answer is just another concept. An answer requires a mind to hold on to it, defend it against skeptics, and remember it.
Right.
When a question is merely answered, the underlying assumption that created the question in the first place remains perfectly intact. But when a question dissolves, the entire intellectual framework that made the question seem urgent or even logical just vanishes.
It's the difference between frantically tearing your house apart for an hour to find the keys you lost versus suddenly realizing you don't actually own a car or a house that needs unlocking.
That's a great way to look at it.
The panic, the desperate search, the anxiety, it all just evaporates instantaneously. Not because you found the object of your search, but because the entire premise of the search was revealed to be an illusion. You didn't find the keys. You realized the concept of keys was no longer applicable to your reality.
Exactly.
And I have to say, reading his account of this realization, I was just floored by his intellectual honesty.
In what specific way?
Well, put yourself in his shoes. He has this profound, life-altering, unequivocally mystical experience at 4:20 a.m., the kind of euphoric, ego-dissolving experience that, frankly, 99% of people would immediately try to monetize.
Oh, absolutely. They would set up a retreat center, anoint themselves a guru, and try to sell this experience as the ultimate objective scientific proof of their preferred cosmic theory.
Totally. But Bandra does the exact opposite. He explicitly writes that this earth-shattering experience proved nothing, because, as he notes, experience proves only itself.
It is a mark of immense philosophical humility and clarity. He isn't standing on a soapbox saying, I experienced a reality without a center, therefore I have returned with the ultimate, indisputable metaphysical blueprint of the cosmos that you must all blindly accept.
Right. He is rigorously maintaining that while this happened and while it fundamentally altered his perception of suffering and existence, it remains, by definition, a subjective experience. It proved itself in that specific moment to his specific localized consciousness.
But, and this is the major pivot point of the entire book, even if that moment didn't output a peer-reviewed scientific theorem, it did do something crucial.
Bandra says the experience pointed.
Exactly. It acted as a compass needle. The experience pointed towards something, and as he spent the subsequent years continuing to investigate with a clear mind, a massive paradigm-breaking possibility began to appear repeatedly, no matter where he looked.
And this is where the deep dive really accelerates, because this possibility wasn't just an isolated anomaly born from his 4:1 a.m. experience.
No, it wasn't.
When he looked back at those 5 tunnels we discussed,